Hey, it's Joshua again, your cultural Catholic. Been a while. You can check out my vlog that I posted yesterday to get a little bit of an idea as to why it's been so long. But let's get into our first ever Knowledge Monday. And today is the start of my mini series on the colonial military of India and a little bit of the colonial history of India, which comes along with it. And so to get right into it, the colonial history of India starts in about the 15th century, about the same time as Columbus sailing to what become known as the Americas, even though he landed in the Caribbean, uh, trying to get to India. Uh, Vasco da Gama, sailing for the Portuguese, made it to India by going around the southern tip of Africa, and he established connections to India for the first time since the fall of Rome. And it was again through sea trade instead of overland trade, which was made impossible by the Ottoman Empire. And so for the next few centuries, there were some trading outposts set up here and there by the British, French, Portuguese, and Spanish, as well as the Dutch. Over time, these were largely consolidated into the French and British, who in the 18th century during the French and Indian Wars, or the Seven Years' War, as is known internationally, fought for control of the subcontinent of India, because the subcontinent of India itself is very rich in resources and people to buy stuff from these imperial powers of France and Britain. And so, by fighting over this territory, they're trying to gain the upper hand over one another to try to become the richest empire in the world. And this was part of the mercantilist system that was the dominant economic theory at the time. And the basic idea of mercantilism is I have all of the money in my system and I become more wealthy within that system by getting more and more wealth. Little side note, obviously that is not the predominant economic theory that is used today, but it was what was used at the time to justify a lot of the imperial expansion, as well as other various things. Anyways, so with the trading posts now largely controlled by Britain and France, by the end of the Seven Years' War, Britain had won, and so by the middle of the 18th century in 1763, Britain gained control of all of India and was able to uh, draw upon that wealth to make it a much more wealthy empire. Now, when the colonization of India was going on, it wasn't the official government of Britain. It was the British East India Trading Company, a private corporation. Now, there was the Dutch East India Trading Company, but the Dutch had left a few decades earlier and were now focused on Indonesia, having direct control over some trade there. I will post in the links below, in the description box below, a crash course world history on this, because they did some really fascinating work on this, and I think that you guys would really enjoy that. And also in the links below will be sources that I used to make this video as well. So over the next century or so, the British East India Company would continue to expand. Now, they started out in what would be now known as Bangladesh, and they continued to expand outward. Not only would they take direct control, but more often than not, they would upset the balance of power and then take control, and then back up someone else to take control of a particular area. Because India at the time was not a united country that we would know of today. It was various amounts of princedoms and kingdoms and other sorts of political entities that were controlled on a much more localized level, and so it was a lot easier for the British East India Company to continue to expand and bring into itself piecemeal different parts of what would be now known as India. Um, that process took about a century, and over the time they would come into contact with the Nepalese and the people of Punjab, and these areas, and coming into contact with these areas, obviously the British East India Company wanted to take control. Sometimes it would be fairly bloodless, but more often, but when it came to the Punjab and Nepal, it became a very deadly situation, and that was the Nepali. And with Nepal, there was the British Anglo-Nepali War of 1836, and with the Punjab, it wasn't pacified until 1849. So there was a lot of expansion and fighting for control, and ultimately by 1849, the British East India Company had complete control over India. Now, the control of India ultimately was largely with the British East India Company. They had their own personal army with British and native soldiers. There were some official British government soldiers there, but not as many as the British East India Company. Actually, British East India European soldiers were paid very, very well in comparison to their government counterparts, and so it was very uh, enticing for a soldier to, after serving in the British Army, to switch over or to not, or to even just sign up for the British East India Company military as opposed to joining the British military. Um, and a lot of the the Indian soldiers at the time were drawn from the Brahmin or Kshatriya castes of India. Um, you may be wondering, what are the Brahmins and Kshatriya? Well, within India, there is a the majority religion is Hinduism. And within Hinduism, there is a caste system. Um, and so the Brahmin and the Kshatriya are the very, very the top two castes that anyone could be in. Brahmins being the priests and Kshatriya being warriors. So drawing on upon these two groups of individuals within Indian society at the time seemed like a good idea because they're the ones that are historically trained for war or prepared for war. Now there were a significant number of Muslims in India and also within the British East India Trading Company Army. So they were they were all fairly well trained, fairly well led, fairly well paid, and with this, and the leadership of the government was the British Raj, and this British Raj was under the control of the British East India Company at the time. This all changed suddenly in 1857, 1858 with the Indian Rebellion, which will be the subject of my next video. Now again, every Monday will be Knowledge Monday. In the description below will be the sources and other resources that I think would be very good to check out. This is Joshua, your cultural Catholic, signing off.